Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG's Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Now, Dennis, I'm just back from conference,
Yes, so I hear.
the LGA conference. I'm not
Mm.
going to talk about the trains. I think anyone who had to travel knows that heat just
Mm.
destroyed everything. It was hellish, but we got there and we got back.
Excellent.
So, a first time for me at the LGA conference, massive, absolutely huge. Exhibitions everywhere, lots and lots of sessions, all the political groups down there, very, very interesting. So, I think, the main themes that I heard time and time again, obviously devolution, obviously regional disparities, this idea of community networks, how everybody's going to be needed to be treated differently. Of course, at the LGA conference, it's very strategic. So if you're looking for
Mm.
sort of minuscule detail or more lawyer speak in understanding, you're not going to find it. These are overarching
Yes.
concepts, but fascinating. Planning featured heavily, education featured heavily, adult social care was touched upon. So the kind of themes you'd expect to see.
Mm.
I got around a few of the exhibitions, always enjoy. I bumped into Jonathan Cart-West from the
Yes.
LGIU, fantastic individual in terms of his thinking. Um, Interestingly, I went across to the ICO exhibition table. They understand at the moment the issues with AI generated complaints. They're getting AI generated complaints as well. So we had a chat about that. And of course, they're not going to have commissioner anymore. They're going to have a new model where they have a chair of their
Mm.
board. So, but they're a long way off, I think, recruiting that. So that's one to watch. The other interesting stand, and I didn't expect them down there, but of course there's big reasons for them to be there, is the Royal Legion. The Royal Legion were there.
Oh, yes.
And of course, they're there this year because people will be familiar or should be familiar with the covenant for those in the armed forces and
Yes.
those leaving the armed forces. Yeah. Well, those duties are going to be extended across a lot of other subject areas now. So local authorities are going to need to know about that. I invited them to come along and talk on a webinar. So we're going to look, we did do one last year on the covenant, but now that there's all these
Interesting.
changes, I've invited them along and we're going to set up a webinar to understand what it is that local authorities are now going to have to do for our service personnel who have left.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was, Dennis. But let's get back to the podcast.
Yes.
Lots to through today. What we turning to first?
Well, interesting. You mentioned planning, and our first item is a planning item. We turn first to the community infrastructure levy and planned adjustments to deal with errors in the regulations. And this is the news that Housing and Planning Minister Matthew Pennycook is to consult on reforms intended to help household developers inadvertently caught out by community infrastructure levy regulations.
Yeah, now this is interesting. So let's just remind ourselves. So SIL regulations, as I call them,
Yeah.
it's a set charge on most new development of 100 square meters or more. So it's not a lot. And new dwellings of any size in areas where a local authority has approved a charging schedule. Now, the SIL regulations were amended back in 2014 to exempt self-builders and those who undertake sort of large extensions or construct residential annexes within their own homes' grounds.
Now, in a letter to SIL charging authorities, Mr. Pennycook said the government is aware of some historic cases where householders have failed to obtain an exemption due to procedural errors, which may have been inadvertent or unintentional. In some cases, householders met the qualifying criteria but did not follow the correct procedures and may not have applied for or received a SIL exemption before commencing development. So, Helen, this could be quite a widespread issue across the country.
Well, it could be, and there's probably people that don't actually know about it as
Mm.
well. So, I mean, there may also have been granted an exemption because retrospective planning permission was granted. That's the other case. So you're right, Dennis. Um, So the consultation, which is due later this year, is going to it's going to seek to ensure that these issues do not arise again in the future and to provide clarity to local authorities over their discretion to take action in specific cases.
Mr. Pennycook said he was confident that the proposed changes would ensure that householders and self-builders would not face unexpected liability charges as a result of procedural errors. And he said the government also recognised historic cases that have already received a CIL charge or were started before any revised regulations take effect.
Yeah, well, the minister also said that local authorities have a degree of discretion over the steps they take to collect CIL, although I do wonder how that sits against the best value duty. And it's been brought to the government's attention that escalated enforcement actions, including threats of forced sale or criminal proceedings, have led to serious consequences for some individuals and families, of course.
Yeah, and going on, he said such action or similar is not required by the regulations without regard to local authorities' broader legal obligations, and the precise approach to CIL collection in any individual case will depend on the specific facts and circumstances.
We've heard this before. We've seen it before, rather, where there's interpretation of the law. I mean, government never do that for local. We're not supposed to do that for local government. It's interesting, but obviously something's gone a bit awry here. Because he did note that local authorities could pay ex gratia compensation from their general funds in exceptional CIL cases where those eligible for help had already paid. Again, that's interesting. So
I'm sure.
yeah, absolutely, Dennis. Quite interesting. Let's move on because the Local Government Association has published new model guidance designed to help councils develop clear and proportionate approaches to elected members' use of social media. This is, of course, I'm sure monitoring officers will agree, quite a thorny issue, has been for some time. So this guidance can be adopted as informal advice, local policy, or in fact, you could incorporate it into your council's constitution and link it to the members' code of conduct, depending on, of course, local preference and governance arrangements.
Yes, the publication responds to growing concerns about the challenges that councillors face online. The LGA notes that online abuse, misinformation and privacy breaches remain significant issues for elected members, with survey evidence showing high levels of abuse and a notable proportion of councillors experiencing the exposure of personal information.
Well, the guidance aims to help councils maximise the benefits of social media engagement. And we can't actually overlook that. You can't just pigeonhole social media and say that's bad. It does have some positives, especially for information where it's the right information. And it can also reduce legal, reputational and personal safety risks whilst doing the opposite at the same time. So a key theme is that councillors remain personally responsible, of course, for what they post online. And the guidance emphasises that the same legal standards, excuse me, apply to social media activity as to offline conduct, and that posts may attract heightened scrutiny because of their accessibility, permanence, of course, and potential reach.
Indeed. And for local authority lawyers, the legal compliance section will be particularly relevant. The guidance highlights several areas of risk. Defamation and libel. Councillors may be liable for publishing or repeating untrue statements that damage a person's or organisation's reputation, including through sharing or republishing content. Next, copyright. Members should ensure that they have appropriate rights before posting images, text, or other third-party content.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that responsibility, actually, we've seen cases, haven't we, where just simply liking a post has got people in trouble as well. So that's not just posting a post, but of course, data protection. That's important. So the guidance says that personal data should not be disclosed without a lawful basis, particularly where information has been obtained through casework, correspondence, or private exchanges. And of course, we come back to bias and determination because councillors involved in planning, licensing, and other quasi-judicial functions should avoid social media activity that could suggest they've reached a decision before hearing all relevant evidence.
Exactly. And last and certainly not least, there's contempt of court. Members are reminded not to publish material that could prejudice active live proceedings or improperly influence jurors, witnesses, or public perceptions of cases.
Well, that's very important. The guidance also reinforces the continuing importance for the members' code of conduct. Even where councillors believe they are acting in a personal capacity, the public may regard them as acting as elected representatives.
Consequently, online activity may fall within the scope of local standards frameworks, and where the guidance has been formally adopted, of course, non-compliance could potentially contribute to a code-related issue.
Well, it could, but then if we don't have any sanctions,
Mm.
anyhow, I won't go on about that.
Yeah.
Alongside legal considerations, the LGA encourages councillors to engage constructively, maintain professional standards, and avoid posting in anger. That's important.
Yeah.
Or sharing unverified information. Again, I think everyone's a bit guilty of that. Look
Indeed.
at the sort, well, where has this come from?
Yeah.
Particularly notable is the warning that statements such as views are my own are actually unlikely to remove legal or conduct related responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And a useful point, this members are reminded in the guidance to post only material they would be comfortable expressing in a public meeting or seeing reported in the local press.
Absolutely. And for monitoring officers and governance teams, the guidance provides a useful framework for reviewing existing social media protocols and ensuring members are supported to use digital platforms safely, lawfully, and effectively.
Exactly. Well, next we turn to closure orders. This is the news that the Home Office has launched a consultation on increasing the length of premises closure orders under the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014. The Crime and Policing Act 2026 gives the Home Secretary new powers to amend the duration of closure orders in the 2014 Act, subject to consultation. Now, the new consultation seeks views on increasing the maximum duration of closure orders issued under Section 80 of the 2014 Act, and also the maximum period for which a closure order can be extended under Section 82, and the maximum overall duration of an extended order.
Do you know, Dennis, you've taken me back there because do you remember the closure orders that were under the old Antisocial Behaviour Act? And I can remember very early doors applying for one somewhere in London. I can't remember where I was, North London. And I got thrown in the witness box and sworn in. To this day, I don't know why that happened, but it did happen. If anyone's got any ideas as to why that might have happened back in the day, please let me know. But I tell you what, when you're standing in the witness box as opposed to an advocate on your feet, it's a different feeling.
Yes, yes.
Different feeling. Anyhow, let's get back to closure orders. So they're
Yes.
issued by the Magistrates Court, as I'm more than aware, and are sought by the police and local authorities to respond quickly where premises are associated with serious nuisance, disorder, or criminal behaviour, enabling them to protect victims and local communities from ongoing harm by prohibiting access and use of the premises.
Currently, a business or premises can be closed for up to 3 months initially, a period which can then be extended by the court for a further 3 months. That is to say, to a maximum not exceeding 6 months.
Well, that was always the case in my recollection.
Yep.
The Home Office is aware through engagement with stakeholders and parliamentary debates during the Crime and Police Act's passage through Parliament of a widespread view by local responders that when used to address high street illegality, and here we're talking, they've used it, haven't they, in sweet shops and vape shops, and the current maximum closure period is in fact too short.
Exactly. Now, increasing the maximum duration of closure orders might also reduce the burden on local authorities, the police and magistrates' courts, by reducing the need for extensions in the first place.
Yeah, because it's the time that's taken to do the other regulatory activities. There's just not enough time. And so the requirement to apply to the Magistrates' Court for a closure order would remain unchanged. So that judicial oversight of long-term restrictions obviously would continue.
Yes, and different regulations can be made to provide for different maximum durations, depending on the nature of the property concerned, for example, residential premises and businesses. Now, the consultation itself closes on the 31st of July.
Yeah, well, we'll take a look at that. because I can see merit for non-residential premises. Um, Now, Dennis, this is an interesting one. We don't often include this type of thing, but have you ever
Uh-huh.
been thrown out of court at all?
Well, let me think. No, not yet, but I'm working on it. But I've got to say this, I too have been before unnecessarily unpleasant judges in my time, and they seem to get away with it, it seems to me.
Well, yeah, I've also experienced that, but I have been thrown out of court. I've been thrown out 3 times in the same court, the same hearing by the same judge. Very well-known judge for this type of, and I am going back, so that's why I'm at
Hmm.
liberty. I feel more at liberty to be able to say it, but didn't like the drafting of an order.
Uh-huh.
I think there was just perhaps alternative motivations for this. But I weathered it and I marched back every time.
Good.
But it's nice to see that things are moving on because taken from the Law Gazette, a recent decision published by the Judicial Conduct Investigations Office provides an important reminder of the standards of judicial conduct expected in court proceedings and the need to maintain professionalism when dealing with advocates.
Yes, District Judge Nicola Murphy has been issued with formal advice for misconduct after an investigation concluded that her behaviour towards a barrister during a hearing was rude.
Mm. Well, the complaint arose from an incident in which the barrister alleged that the judge had behaved in a rude, aggressive, and bullying manner, criticised his tone, refused to allow him to clarify his role as counsel, and ultimately excluded him from the hearing. And then the hearing then proceeded without the barrister, and this is the crutch, really, leaving his client unrepresented.
Hmm. Now, the judge denied the allegations and argued that her actions were a response to what she perceived as disrespectful and intimidating behaviour. She maintained that the barrister had continued to challenge the court's authority despite warnings and said her actions were motivated by concerns about safety and courtroom standards.
Yes, but after reviewing the audio recording of the hearing, investigators found that confusion had arisen at the outset when those attending were introduced collectively as the parties, and the judge initially mistook the barrister for his client.
Now, once the barrister explained that he was acting as a representative, the investigation found that the judge repeatedly criticised his tone. And importantly, investigators concluded that the barrister had not been impolite or discourteous, and that the judge's criticisms, including references to a zero tolerance policy, were unjustified.
Well, the JCIO concluded that the judge's conduct was rude, with the situation made worse by the barrister's exclusion from the hearing in front of the parties. And while the misconduct finding did not
Yes.
result in a more serious sanction, the Lady Chief Justice and the Lord Chancellor issued formal advice taking account of the judge's previously unblemished record. Now, what have you got to say about that?
Yeah. Well, Helen, this decision reinforces the principle, doesn't it, that judicial authority must be exercised always fairly and proportionately, while ensuring that legal representatives are afforded a proper opportunity to participate in proceedings.
Yeah, that's got to be right. And I'm glad there's a change here, Dennis, because I
Hmm.
think traditionally, historically, I think things weren't necessarily
No,
as they are now. I think
nothing used to happen, I think.
no, well, certainly books flying through the air at your head um, wasn't unheard of at one point. So
Indeed.
let's return to a matter we have covered before, and that's foreign money in UK elections. Interesting one, this.
It is, and very topical, of course. Well, new election rules are coming. This is the news that tough new rules are to be introduced to crack down on foreign money in UK elections. New rules include a cap on donations from those who've lived overseas and tougher checks on company donations.
There will be new safeguards to stop foreign money influencing UK elections, including a time-bound cap on donations on those who move to the UK from overseas. Now, government will introduce tougher checks on company donations and will ensure only legitimate UK-linked businesses can contribute with donations assessed against profits rather than revenue.
Candidates will be required to prove campaign funding comes from legitimate sources, strengthening transparency and closing loopholes in political finance rules. Foreign money influencing UK elections will be stamped out under a major package of reforms to strengthen political finance rules, and protect British democracy.
Well, the government has confirmed that it will introduce a new time-bound cap, as I've said, on large political donations from people who've recently moved to the UK, in effect creating a minimum amount of time someone must permanently be based in the country before they can donate over the cap to a political party or candidate. Now, other new measures include stronger tests on company donations, new and tough transparency requirements for candidates, and the closing of loopholes that could be exploited by those seeking to interfere in UK elections.
The measures announced as part of the government's response to the independent Rycroft review will strengthen safeguards against foreign financial influence and reinforce the UK's position as a world leader in defending democratic integrity. Secretary of State Steve Reid said, "British democracy is not for sale. These tough new rules will shut down dodgy funding, stop foreign money influencing our elections, and keep our democracy strong."
Now, turning to our final item of the podcast, and this is something we have mentioned quite a bit actually previously, Dennis, because Ofsted has announced a significant change in its approach to tackling unregistered children's homes, warning that vulnerable children continue to be placed in settings that operate outside the regulatory framework and may expose them to serious safeguarding risks.
In a speech published on the 2nd of July this year, Yvette Stanley, Ofsted's National Director for Regulation and Social Care, set out plans for stronger enforcement and increased scrutiny of both providers and commissioning authorities.
Yes, and her speech highlights the scale of the issue. And we've mentioned figures before. Ofsted were made aware of more than 900 suspected unregistered children's homes during 2024, while the Public Accounts Committee estimated that around 1 in 10 children in residential care were living in unregistered settings during a typical month. And this is to do with supply. And actually, there's a massive amount of money involved in all of this. Ofsted also pointed to concerns about a shadow market in which some providers have reportedly charged up to, wait a minute, £30,000 per week per child.
Particularly concerning are allegations that some illegal providers may be connected to organised criminal activity, including county lines operations, money laundering, and the exploitation of vulnerable children. Now, although the allegations remain subject to investigation, Ofsted has made clear that it intends to take a more proactive role in identifying and disrupting unlawful provision.
Well, something needs to be done incredibly quickly, doesn't it? Because these are the most vulnerable individuals in our society. I mean, the new approach is supported by powers introduced through the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Act 2026, which enables Ofsted to impose civil penalties on those operating or managing unregistered children's homes. And Ofsted has also established a dedicated national team bringing together investigative, legal and policy expert to strengthen enforcement action. I think it needs to be stronger than that.
Indeed, it does. And for local authority lawyers, one of the most significant aspects of the announcement concerns commissioning practices. Ofsted intends to consult on changes to its inspection framework so that a local authority's use of illegal provision may count against it when assessing sufficiency within children's services inspections.
It doesn't change the resource element, though, the availability and sufficiency refers to the statutory responsibility, I should say, to secure enough suitable accommodation for looked after children. And the speech is a clear reminder of the legal framework already governing placements. But I'll come back again to, if it's not there, what are you doing? What can you do?
Exactly.
So.
Now, Ofsted notes that children under 16 cannot lawfully be placed in an unregistered children's home, and that the Care Planning, Placement and Case Review England regulations 2010 place strict limits on the use of unregulated accommodation.
Well, I mean, to be balanced here, Ofsted have acknowledged severe placement pressures facing councils, but it's stated that commissioning such provision will often amount to a breach of existing legal duties, which is true, I suppose.
Yep. Now, Ofsted's message is therefore twofold: stronger enforcement against unlawful providers and greater accountability for public bodies that continue to rely upon them.
And monitoring officers, heads of legal, and obviously children's services lawyers may wish to review local placement practices and governance arrangements, or at least, start those conversations with your director in anticipation of the proposed changes to the inspection regime. And might I suggest the government looks across to Wales, who have implemented placements can only be provided by charities or non-private entities,
Not
because
for
that
profit.
seems marvelous development. But I
Yes.
do understand that that's going to be much more tricky because of the size and scope of England. But on that note, and my personal little rant, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 25, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And for me too. Bye-bye now.